the Toronto Star. I'm Saba Eitizaz, and this matters. In a race to meet immigration goals set back by a pandemic, Canada has opened doors to thousands through a one-time opportunity. But the doors aren't open all the way, and they're not for everyone. Let's talk about Canada's one-time permanent residence program. There's a limited time window. 90,000 spots are up for grabs, and many international graduates and essential migrant workers see this as their only chance to make their immigration dreams come true and make a life in Canada. But to qualify, they need to jump a lot of hoops and navigate a tricky system, all in the middle of a pandemic. The one-time system, quite like COVID itself, is highlighting disparities. The opportunity comes at a price, and not every immigrant can pay it. The Star's immigration reporter Nicholas Keung joins me on This Matters to talk about the new program, why it was needed, and how applicants can try to navigate it. Hi, Nicholas. Thank you for joining me again.
Hi, Saba. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on your show.
Nicholas, it's been such a chaotic, unprecedented time through COVID-19, borders being closed, then being partially reopened, travel restrictions, which are continuing. Talk to me a bit about how this pandemic impacted Canada's immigration system.
The pandemic has changed every single aspect of how we live and how we work, and is no exception when it comes to our immigration system. For one, our border is restricted, so foreign nationals, unless their travel is considered essential, have had a tough time arriving, even if they are accepted as permanent residents. In terms of the whole processing of immigration applications is in chaos. More than a year into the pandemic, the immigration department is still not at full processing capacity. Officers are still working from home, and some programs still only accept paper applications rather than online applications. So that's another challenge in terms of how you move files into the hands of the decision makers. In some cases, applicants have trouble getting their own documentation that they need for their applications.
So in light of this, Canada basically had a goal for bringing in around 400,000 newcomers in 2021. So this must have taken a big hit, right? Talk to me a little about why it's really important for us to reach that goal.
So last year, we fell short for 40% in reaching our targets of 341,000 new immigrants. And for 2021, the government wants to bring in 410,000 permanent residents. That's our 2021 goal. A lot of people wondered how Canada would manage to do that with no end in sight with the pandemic. So only the newcomers who land in Canada, meaning physically here, are counted towards the target. So what Ottawa has done is to turn to the pool of potential candidates from within Canada who are on temporary status, such as international students and temporary workers, and transit them from temporary status on student permits or work permits into full-fledged permanent residents to make up the number.
So a way to fill in the gaps is to have people who are already here apply to this. Could you clarify a little more who might be eligible?
The new immigration pathway, which is one time only, has a goal to transition 90,000 of those temporary residents in Canada into permanent residents. It's certainly launched with that in mind to fill the gaps. Earlier this year, the government made a similar effort to lower the point threshold that applicants needed to meet in order to be invited for immigration. That one draw picked more than 27,000 applicants to apply for permanent residence. So between these two initiatives, about 25% of the 2021 target is supposed to be met. So this new special pathway that everyone has been talking about since April includes several streams, including one for international students who recently graduated and are currently employed in any job. One stream is for temporary foreign workers in the health sector, and one for essential workers in non-health related jobs. So all these three streams are kept, meaning once the number of applications received reach the quota, officials will stop accepting applications. There are also three other uncapped streams for candidates who are French speaking and fully bilingual in French and English.
What requirements do potential applicants need to keep in mind?
So in terms of eligibility, the programs for international graduates and essential workers are not that demanding. There's the minimum language requirements, the standard health and criminal clearances. For international students to qualify, they just need to have graduated from an eligible post-secondary program within the past 4 years, dating back to January 2017. And if they are currently employed, they do not need to be in any specific occupation to meet the requirements. But for the essential workers, they do need at least 1 year of work experience in one of the 40 healthcare occupations, as well as 95 other different essential jobs across a range of fields such as caregiving and food production and distribution.
And Nicholas, you recently wrote about how there's some criticism that applicants are having to navigate the system by themselves and it can be a bit complicated. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What should applicants expect as they log on to the system to apply?
Applicants, they really have to be really prepared with all the forms already downloaded and filled and all documents like employer's reference letter, TEFLs, copies of their passports, all the information about the places where they've lived the last 10 years, transcripts from schools, pretty much, their life history ready and documented. If they have dependents such as spouses and children, they need to have their files and documents ready as well. A lot of people, who can afford lawyers and consultants do try to get their professional help. But with this new program, in anticipation that the system would crash, the government actually contracted Amazon to design a new portal just for the new pathway program to process those applications. But because it had to be rolled out in such a short time, we're talking about the announcement of the program only came out on April 14th. And then the detailed application guide only came out 24 hours before the program accepted applications this week. Because it's rolled out in such a rush that the system would allow people to be accessed by applicants themselves, and it's not hooked up to the regular portal that's already in existence that allows legal counsel to do all these applications for clients in all the other current immigration programs. So many applicants instead are having to maneuver the process on their own or with their lawyers and consultants on a Zoom call to make sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, so the applications won't be refused simply because they are missing a document or they've forgotten to fill out certain information.
We'll be right back. And I think you recently observed someone who was attempting to apply as well. Can you walk me through the process a little? What did that look like? Did the applicant struggle, or did it seem like a fairly intuitive process?
Yes, actually, I spent about 40 minutes with an applicant going through the application process with his lawyer. So, an applicant has to log in and create an account, and then they're supposed to get a code to activate the account before they could actually download all the forms, all the photos required in the process. I don't know whether I would call it easy, but it certainly did go smoothly. The whole process, I think, for him took about half an hour. And there were, thank God, no glitches or hitches. But I still don't know if I would call the process easy, because if you look at the application guide, it's all legal speak. And even, little issues such as whether you need a studio photo or a wet signature or just a digital signature, applicants were confused. And honestly, I've spoken with lawyers, and even, some lawyers, were confused and they had to reach out to immigration officials for clarifications. And, people's life hinges on, this one application form. It's a big deal, and you don't want to screw it up, especially when this pathway is truly a once in a lifetime opportunity for many who might not otherwise qualify. You need all the stars aligned to make this happen. And the pandemic has made it come true for a lot of people.
Right. And like you said, a lot of people's future kind of hinges on that. And not everybody might have the privilege of access to a consultant or a lawyer as well. What are some of the other challenges and limitations to the way this program has been set up? What are the immigration experts saying? I saw in one of your pieces that they said the process might be too restrictive as well in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. Certainly, one big issue is the language requirement, which is a big part because people do need to provide proof of a valid language test result. And people, they did, once the program was announced, a lot of people scrambled to try to book a test ASAP. But then we are in the middle of a third wave of COVID. There are limited sittings for these language tests that must be taken in person, even when we're in a lockdown. And on top of that, some advocates feel that the criteria are somewhat restrictive. Think about it. There are currently some 1.5 million migrants, temporary residents, including those on work permits, study permits, asylum seekers, and undocumented individuals in Canada. Yet, there are only 90,000 slots available through this pathway. And the demand is certainly much, much bigger than the slots available. And like any other immigration programs, the government does charge an application fee to cover its processing costs. The new program is no exception. For a single adult, for example, the application fee is $1,050. And you need to get documents translated, pay a fee for transcripts, the English test costs about $300. For many people, that's not a small sum of money, easily talking about, a couple of $1,000s on those. Then to boost your chances, one would would like to have some professional help. So that's, another several $1,000s of legal fees just to get the application package in shape. All these costs could preclude many from accessing the pathway.
Not to mention the stress of having to do this during a time of COVID restrictions and the fallout from the pandemic. As you mentioned, a lot of English language test providers were being flooded with applications and processing. And just as we've seen in the pandemic and the vaccine rollout, we've seen the inequality among us. A lot of migration advocates are saying this program might be telling a similar story in terms of who can and cannot be a part of it. And it seems like you are talking about the cost and the criteria currently serving as a barrier for many, right?
Yes, correct. A lot of the essential workers, who would be applying for this program, probably, they're not qualified for the other, programs that demand, university degrees, a very high level of language proficiency. We're talking about, probably someone who is working as a personal support worker, someone who work in agriculture, who don't necessarily have, formal education, but they do have all these skills that keep our economy running, during the pandemic with all the lockdowns. And I've heard quite a bit of criticisms from people who wondered if Canada really, still needs more immigrants and temporary foreign workers when the economy is struggling as a result of the lockdown or all the slowdown of economic activities. I think certainly the economy and job markets is, are changing. And I think it really, depends on, what sectors we're talking about. There are fewer jobs, for example, in retail and hospitality. So do we need more people coming to those jobs? There's also the regional labor market needs that vary from province to province, city to city, town to town. If you talk to a farming community, yes, they need more farm workers. So unless more Canadians are willing to move from cities to rural communities and then out back to plant, trim, and harvest, we do need more bodies, more workers, more foreign workers in those jobs. And in terms of other jobs, certainly we have seen the need to bring in workers in healthcare. What the pandemic has shown us is there is actually a new dimension when we look at jobs. It's no longer just about high skills versus low skills, high wage versus low wage, but there's a new dimension, essential and non-essential. Does the knowledge-based economy not need laborers? Can most mid and small sized businesses afford automation, or they would rather stick to cheap migrant workforce? How do we prepare a future workforce? And, through our education system, through our apprenticeship programs. And how should the immigration system be used to complement all these other policies? These are all, very big questions to contemplate. And I think we need a national dialogue, of all these different public policy pieces. And we just cannot afford to deal with any of these, in silos, including immigration.
And that was actually going to be my next question, because the pandemic in many ways has also shown us the importance of immigrants and international workers in Canada's economy and workforce. And a lot of them have been the most badly impacted as well during this time. And from what you're saying, it seems like there might be a need to have a larger conversation about Canada's immigration system in the light of all we've been through during COVID, and not just look at temporary fixes, right?
Exactly. I think, certainly, some of these essential jobs are permanent jobs. They are not, temporary jobs. So another big issue, I think, aspect of it that we need to look at is, about, how we view immigrants. Are they just these bodies that we need, for the economy, or there's actually a bigger discussion that we need to have about nation building, right? And certainly, we also need to look at immigration through an equity lens as well, whether low-skilled essential workers, essential migrants are as deserving to become Canadians as someone, who's a scientist, for example.
All of this is something to think about. Thank you so much for your insight and your time, Nicholas. This was a very important conversation.
Thanks so much again for having me here today.
I was talking to the Toronto Star's immigration reporter, Nicholas Keung. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Saba Eitizaz, Adrian Chung, and Raju Munter. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So-Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.